Hi everyone, we're going to talk about insomnia today. I'm going to give you some acupressure points you can use to help insomnia and talk about the different patterns of disharmony that are associated with insomnia in Chinese medicine. If you're new to the channel, make sure you click subscribe and like the video, share the video, all that good stuff. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hello, welcome back to the Chinese Medicine Podcast. I'm Hopkinson. I'm a Chinese herbalist and an acupuncturist, and today we're going to be talking about insomnia.
I can't get no sleep.
Answering a subscriber's question about that. So I've got a new little green screen and testing that out today. So I'm going to pop up some cool pictures in the background. Hopefully that's going to work. Otherwise you'll just be seeing the green screen. So I've got some books here from Chinese medicine and I want to talk about insomnia, and I'm going to use some of these books that are the typical TCM books to talk about the different kinds of patterns. Okay, so I've got a few textbooks here that are common textbooks that Chinese medicine students use. One that you might see if you're a TCM student would be The Practice of Chinese Medicine by Giovanni Maciocia. Another one would be this Will McLean textbook, Will McLean and Jane Littleton, The Handbook of Chinese Medicine. This is great. I've got the page marked out here for insomnia. So there's all these different patterns of disharmony for insomnia, right? Like heaps. So that's why I've kind of put that there so you can see it. That's why I kind of wanted to bring these books to show you that there's a lot of different things that can be going on in Chinese medicine to be able to cause it. So it's not just as simple as, oh, you need to do these three things and you'll fall asleep easily, or this is why you're not falling asleep. It's quite varied. The other book that I like to use a lot when I was just doing TCM before I did classical Chinese medicine was this Bob Flores Chinese Medical Psychiatry book. And I'm going to get to why insomnia is included in that section of Chinese medicine at the end of this video, if that's relevant, I guess. But so insomnia is considered like a disorder of the heart or the shen, of the mind. It's definitely going to disturb your mind, and a lot of people who already have a disturbed mind struggle with insomnia as well. So it can go either way. It could be because you've got a disturbed mind, you've got insomnia, or when you've got insomnia, you're going to end up with a disturbed mind. So I'm not going to harp on about the stuff in these books too much, but I just wanted to mention that there's loads of patterns of disharmony. So for instance, in the psychiatry book in Bob Flores, he has many patterns. So heart and spleen deficiency, heart and spleen, both probably blood deficiency, liver blood deficiency with deficient heat, and non-interaction between heart and kidneys. So we're going to talk about that pattern in a minute, called heart and kidney not communicating, or discommunication between the heart and kidneys, or he's saying non-interaction between the heart and kidneys, and that's all the same thing, right? Just different ways of saying it. Heart yin deficiency pattern. Heart gallbladder qi deficiency pattern. Number 7, liver fire harassing internally pattern. Number 8, heart fire effulgence. I could never pronounce that word. So like this is often said heart fire blazing. That's often what I'm sure Giovanni calls it that. Retained heat, like residual heat or latent heat or lingering heat pattern. Food stagnation pattern. They're all the ones that he mentions. Okay, in the Will McLean and Jane Littleton book, they mention liver qi stagnation with stagnant heat and fire, heart fire. Number 3, stomach disharmony. 4, phlegm heat. 5, blood stagnation. 6, heart blood and spleen qi deficiency. Number 7, heart and kidney yin deficiency. Number 8, heart and gallbladder qi deficiency. Number 9, liver yin in brackets blood deficiency. So you can understand why it's complicated, right? And I'm not even going to read the Giovanni ones because they're kind of similar, and I'm just getting that each textbook might have 9 or so patterns of disharmony, so different reasons why it could be caused. So it is highly individualized, and insomnia is something that you really need the guidance of a practitioner to help you if it's got to that point of being so bad that you have the things you've tried to fix you've done some things to try to fix it by yourself and that hasn't worked. It might be time to really seek the proper guidance of a practitioner. Now, I've also seen patients where they've had very long-standing insomnia and it has been hard to treat it. It's not like, I'm not saying acupuncture and herbs can just treat it straight away. There are some things where it's been going on for so long that that person's got a really established, firm, grasped pattern of disharmony happening in their body, and it's hard to disrupt that. So you need to seek the guidance of your practitioner. On this video and on this channel, I don't make claims about treatment. I'm not trying to say we can treat it or whatever. I'm just explaining how Chinese medicine goes about thinking about something like insomnia. So let's start back at the beginning in Chinese medicine. What is insomnia? Difficulty sleeping or poor sleep. So what is sleep? We need to kind of understand what that is and why that's important. A big distinction I want to make that I think other systems of medicine don't really make is that what is proper good sleep or sound sleep includes the lack of dreaming. So excessive dreaming or any kind of remembrance of your dreams is considered a type of insomnia. It's or at least considered not the greatest sleep you could have. So what's the greatest sleep you could have? It would be just basically closing your eyes, falling asleep, and then waking up in the morning. I remember I had a patient who was a young kid once, and he had some trouble sleeping from lots of different things, like that had caused his pattern of disharmony. He took the herbs. The herbs were disgusting. He really didn't want to take them. But he took them, and I was so proud of him that he did that because I know that formula doesn't taste very good. And I said to him, the next time I said, how's your sleep now? Like this was 2 weeks later. And he said, he described it like this. He said, I close my eyes and then it's the morning. I was like, well, you've got the most perfect sleep you could ever imagine. That is the most perfect sleep. You close your eyes and then it's the morning, right? You've got no recollection of the night. And when you're a little kid, you probably had sleep like that. That's where we get the name of like, oh, sleeping like a baby. Like you take a little baby who's asleep, they can, once they've gone asleep, sometimes nothing can wake that baby up because they're just so, their senses are so shut off. And that's what I want to talk about is in sleep. That's what sleep is. So your mind or your shen in Chinese medicine is a spiritual resource, and so it's your consciousness, right? Now your brain is the physical structure where that resides, but when you're awake and alert, your shen is the most active. Your shen is a very complex thing. Now we could have another discussion on that if people want to have a video about that. We could talk about what the shen is in Chinese medicine, but it is a multifaceted thing. So it's often translated as the mind, also sometimes translated as spirit, the mental, emotional functions of our body. So it's definitely awareness and consciousness. So you don't want to be completely unconscious, like in a coma when you're sleeping, but you want to be almost as close to that as you can be so that your body internally is going to regulate when you're going to wake up and that you do wake up. So you don't want to be so unconscious that you can't wake up, but you don't want to be aware of things at night. So what happens when you go to sleep is that the consciousness or your mind is the yang of your body, and that comes down to rest in the yin. And this is where they get this pattern idea of called heart and kidney not communicating. We'll talk about what that means in a minute. So this idea of like your mind comes kind of down to rest. I often describe this as to my TCM students as like, they describe the heart as being like a place of residence for the shen. And it's kind of like it comes down to rest in that. And it needs to be relatively cool for it to have a good rest. And this is also likened to our body's dislike of heat at night. So depending on where you live in the world and what situation you have where you live, you may have very hot nights. And you've probably noticed if it is very hot, it's very hard to sleep, and it's very you're very restless and you're kind of at the mercy of the elements. Remember that a lot of these principles, or all these principles, came from times where people didn't have artificial things. They didn't have air conditioning. So these sages and people that were talking about our different needs for sleep, like things from the Han Dynasty, where you get this idea from the Yellow Emperors, classic of internal medicine, the Neijing, they describe our different needs of sleep and rest and things like that in... I've done a different video on that, so I won't kind of sort of go into that in too much detail now. But, they didn't create... It wasn't just the same thing the whole year round. So we're kind of lucky that we can have air conditioning, I guess, if you've got a really hot time or you've got this cooling blanket. So you've got things like that. You can regulate your your sleep in somewhat just from the outside environment. So that those things can be highly beneficial. But this idea that our body actually likes a lower temperature to sleep, and lots of research not related to Chinese medicine kind of supports that. To the point where if you've got a partner that likes the aircon on or off and the other one doesn't, then one might have a good sleep and one might not have such a great sleep if they're really sensitive to that. So that is mimicked externally just as it is internally. And this idea that your heart could have this pattern called heart fire blazing or heart heat, it makes it very uncomfortable for the mind to rest in there. So it's kind of the same idea of like you tossing and turning at night because you're hot and you're restless. That could be happening because the external environment's hot, but it also could be happening because your internal environment's too hot. Now, what's that heat? What is that heat? It's actually your own body's energy. It's your own body's yang. It's not like a fever. Now that can also affect you, but people wouldn't be having a fever for months and months, hopefully not. That's affecting your sleep, right? So you can probably understand this if you have never had that, but you've had a fever and you've been like, oh, wow, I remember, it was so hot, or I was so restless, or even that you had a lot of dreams. You can get these fever dreams, right? Because your mind is active because of that heat. So what happens is as you go to bed, you've gone to bed, but as you're starting to fall asleep, your consciousness, your Shen, is shutting off its awareness of all these things. So awareness of touch, awareness of hearing, obviously awareness of taste. You shouldn't be eating anything in bed or things like that. So if something has happened to you, like you've been broken into, your house has been robbed or something like that, or you're anxious about your safety in some way because of something that's happened recently or even in the past, that sometimes your consciousness won't allow you to shut things off as easily as it was before, because it's like thinking, well, if I'm not safe, if my body's not protected, like if wild animals might come and eat me because I'm sleeping in a tent or something, or this often happens to people who are homeless, is they get these types of blood deficiency patterns, like where they get manic and very unwell mentally just because of lack of sleep. So how does that happen? Because when you're sleeping, your body's repairing. When you're sleeping, your body is restoring blood or replenishing blood. So that's the second point, is to say you when you're sleeping, it should be no awareness. So you shouldn't be hearing things, waking up from sounds, waking up from things touching you, being aware of your body, that kind of stuff. So you need a comfortable place. It goes without saying almost, but I'm going to say it anyway. You need a comfortable place to sleep. You need a safe place to sleep. And it's kind of normal if you're experiencing insomnia in a new place, because your mind is not allowing you to rest because it's protecting your safety. It's like, I remember when I've moved house before, and you're getting used to those things. So if you're not comfortable in those surroundings, or you might be just getting used to those surroundings, new surroundings, then your brain or your Shen is going to alert you, because that's its nature, is to say, hang on, what's that sound? What's this? What's that? This is why people do some things like, I remember once I bought a dog to help me to cope with all these weird sounds. Like I was living actually in the back of my shop. I had a shop at the front and a house at the back. And it would be noisy from time to time because it was near a train station and people would be making noise all the time. And I could hear that noise and you'd be like, oh, what's that? What's that? What's that? And as soon as I got a dog, I was like, oh, well, the dog will take care of it. If it's really that bad, dog will bark. And so I was then able to just fall asleep soundly and it didn't bother me anymore, right? So those sorts of things can help. Now, it might not be feasible to get a dog, but that can help. I've also had patients that have told me that their animals are the things keeping them up at night, which is sad because, that these are complicated situations. You get to love your animal, and of course you're going to do everything you can for it. But like I've had people that have said, my cat wakes me up to go to the toilet at 3 a.m. or something. It's like, I'd be just like, get a new cat. But, I get that we love our pets and that kind of stuff as well. So that can be the case. Another thing could be waking you up. You could have a baby. You could have, these are things that are struggling, kids that are waking up. kids that are coming into bed, maybe your partner's wrestling, maybe your partner's restless next to you and making sounds or noises or getting hot in the bed near you, and that might, pushing you out of the bed even or something like that. So these are all other factors that you could try to resolve those things as quickly as possible or some way. It's very hard for people to sleep on command, like, they're like, oh, my kid, has woken me up and disturbed my sleep. Some mums find it very hard to just fall back to sleep again. So that's normal and that's natural, that those are seasons of life. But we're talking about just in general, like if that's not happening to you, you do have a safe place to live and a safe space. Sometimes, and that safety has also got to do with our perception of what's safe. Like, you might feel that you need a certain things to make that area feel safe, and whereas another person might come into that same space and be like, that doesn't bother me, I don't need to feel that. So if that's something, that's the first, these are easy fixes, that's why I'm mentioning them now, before you start trying to change the physiology of your body, right? If your brain is keeping you awake because of something, you might not even really acknowledge it. You might think, well, especially if your insomnia has been like, or ever since something happened, I haven't been able to sleep very well. So that would be the first thing. The second thing that could come from that ever since something happened would be like an emotional thing that's happened. So someone's passed away, or some loss has happened to you, or something you're struggling with, like you're really struggling with a difficult decision in life, like should I get married with this person, or should I leave my job, should I change my career, like these kinds of things. And your brain is literally processing that. Your mind, your Shen, your consciousness is kind of powering through these things, and it's maybe something that you need to then talk to a psychologist about, or a counsellor, or do some journaling or some other things that you could try to do yourself to self-process through that, or get someone to help you process through that. Because if you're having sleep disturbance because of that, it's happened to me at times in my life where I've had something so difficult that I've had to face, and it's so hard. And it's like, as soon as that decision's made, or as soon as that thing has happened, it's like, oh, that relief, and you're then able to sleep again. I'm fortunate myself. I've hardly ever had any sleep problems, but I understand, because I speak to many, many, many patients about this, and it's also a very common thing. And there's other reasons why people find their brain can't shut down, and we'll talk about that as well. So the two main patterns or things that you can probably identify that would be easy patterns to I don't want to say self-treat in completion, like as in you can just do these yourself, but you can intervene with some self-treatments in these ways. So one of these things is this heart and kidney not communicating, and that can often be linked to blood deficiency. Like people can often have, or a general deficiency kind of pattern going on. Let's just say a general deficiency. So we'll talk about that. And also the other one that I find is very common, it's also more easier to kind of intervene in with the self-help things, is the stomach heat or Yang Ming heat kind of a pattern. So this is when people find they wake up at night, they might even wake up hungry at night, they might feel very hungry late at night, because often this pattern is caused by eating late at night, and so that's the first thing you should stop doing, or try to stop doing. And the people often have a ravenous hunger associated with this. Now, sometimes you'll have a pain or a tightness in your epigastric area, like that's the area just under your ribs, in the middle of your stomach area, in the middle of your tummy, just above your umbilicus, above your belly button, under your ribs area. So they might feel tight or uncomfortable there. Sometimes people feel bloated, or some other digestive problems could be associated with it. But if you just have those digestive things, and it doesn't necessarily mean you have this pattern. So again, I want to issue the the standard disclaimer, like this is not a replacement for medicine or seeing a practitioner, but just to kind of help guide you with some self-help and some understanding about how Chinese medicine thinks about things. So Yang Ming is the stomach and your large intestine organs. And their general nature when they go out of balance is to get hot, is to heat up, right? Now, when that happens, people often get acne. they get pimples breaking out in their body, or they could get other things breaking out, like they could get like herpes or something like that happen, or some kind of skin lesions breaking out. That's a common associative sort of thing that happens with this pattern of disharmony. It's not always associated with eating late at night, but that is something that you could stop doing or try to not do. The other thing that causes this stomach heat to get exacerbated is like eating richer foods, eating things that would, we've had other videos before about dampening things, like that kind of stuff would probably cause it. Alcohol is incredibly heating, right? All forms of alcohol have some kind of heating effect on your body, and especially having those things later at night, you're just simply putting heat into your body. So hot and spicy food would be one, alcohol, and then sugar. So any of these things or all of these things. So these are people that might, have trouble, that usually with this type of thing, you're waking up in the nighttime. Like you might be okay to fall asleep, especially if you have alcohol, you might fall asleep okay, but then like you sort of wake up in the night and you're like restless in the night, or hot at night, waking up hot. So not necessarily like a sweating, like you could be, but it's more, these are more just sort of waking up feeling, waking up in the night. So there's different types of insomnia that a practitioner might ask you some questions about. They'll ask you things like, do you dream a lot at night? Are the dreams really vivid? Are they just sort of, are they scary dreams and kind of really taking over your mind, like, or very active dreams? That's certainly a more severe case of like your mind being active than someone that just goes, oh yeah, I dreamed, this beautiful garden and this kind of adventurous thing, and it wasn't too involved, or they may have some dreams. So that's part. It's often part of this heat, because when there's heat there. Now that heat could be coming from the stomach, but it could also, as we saw in these other textbooks, it could be coming from like a hotness in your pericardium or your heart, like this pattern called heart fire blazing. So that's more of it's a much more internally caused problem, and like just stopping eating late at night isn't going to like treat that at all, really. So that's where you really need to see a practitioner. I will give you some acupressure points you could try for these things in a moment, and that could help. But these are things where really, like at this point, herbal medicine's probably much more warranted than or like a course of acupuncture treatments, rather than just stopping something or changing something like that. So with this heat in the Yang Ming or stomach heat type of things, or food stagnation that was another pattern mentioned in there. Like, so overeating, there's not really necessarily a mental component to it, as in the person might not have any anxiety or depression or any sort of mental stuff happening in the daytime. They just have poor sleep. They just wish they could have better sleep, and it's really confined. That means the heat's kind of confined to that area. It's just a disturbance of the function of the stomach. It's like, its job is to warm up and to digest the food. Like your stomach is a degree hotter than the rest of your body, so it needs to do that, and it's generally what it's going to do. But if it's doing that too much, then that heat causes or it could be happening because there's a blockage in the stomach area. So when we say stomach area, not just the stomach itself, but from the stomach all the way down to your anus, to where it comes out. If things aren't moving properly there, like you might have a sluggish bowel, you can't go to the toilet properly, or maybe a bit of constipation, or even people that have diarrhea but it's like doesn't come out properly, it's sort of incomplete, it might go 3 or 4 times, or there's warmness when you go, right? It feels like a bit of a warm poo is coming out, then that would mean that there's like some kind of blockage there. And then think about whenever something's blocked, it's stuck, and then it can't be moved, and then because of that stuckness, a heating up can kind of happen. And in Western medicine, this is kind of the way they describe like an inflammation, right? So you could say it'd be similar to the concept of inflammation. So that's one thing. And I'm mentioning that because that's an easy one to help yourself with. And if that's not the case and you think you have that, but you do those protocols I've just told you, like you stop having alcohol and you don't have much sugar and you you don't eat late at night, well, you've only done yourself a service. Like you shouldn't be doing that stuff anyway. Like that's good for you. So they're things that, are healthy things you can try to do. Now, acupuncture points you could try to use would be, the first one I'd try to use is this Hergu one here on your hand. So that's a Yang Ming large intestine point. So just kind of, if you go on your hand and you sort of feel down into that little crevice, sort of halfway between this second metacarpal bone there. So you just kind of press in there like that. That Yang Ming point, large intestine 4 would be a good one. You could also come all the way up to your elbow. You've got the crease of your elbow. Just kind of show you here. So just at the end of that crease, there's a kind of a point there. You just kind of straighten your elbow. So really what you want to do is just massaging around there. So that large intestine channel kind of goes all the way down there. And so you could just massage a bit of that large intestine channel, and just particularly finding the spots that, this one's Scholz Lee, this point, that's a bit sore on me. So you could just press that in there. Okay, so that point there. And the other points you could use would be stomach 36. I might just put a picture up on the on the screen. So stomach 36, and you can just kind of press that on your leg. Just kind of press that down. And the other point would be stomach 44, which is in the web of your toe. So I'm just showing you on my hand here, but you can kind of press that between the webs of your toes. So I'll put those as a picture there so you can kind of see them. So stomach 44, stomach 36, and just really that whole stomach channel down the leg, and then your large intestine 11 to 4, just kind of massaging down that channel. What's good with acupressure is if you find a sore point, you just press on that sore point, and that's a good way to kind of do it. So these are points you could just use once a day, a couple of times a day if you needed, especially if you're sitting there watching TV before you go to bed, you could try to do that for relieving some of that heat. So particularly if you're having trouble waking up at night. So another pattern of disharmony that's commonly causing insomnia is like just being, let's just say, depleted, deficient. In classical Chinese medicine, they often use this terminology of taxation, like, it's not just a functional system. You're actually there's substance that needs to be more there that isn't there. Now, this can be in the form of blood deficiency. And so then your blood can't sort of hold on to the warmness of it, which is the yang, and then that kind of floats up at night. Now, in TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, they have a pattern of disharmony called yin deficiency with effulgent fire. I think that's what Bob Falls was calling it, effulgent fire, or deficient fire or deficient heat rising, right? Or sometimes even yin deficiency with deficient fire. It's the same kind of concept, but the way it's treated in classical Chinese medicine is way different to treated in TCM, because in TCM they think that the yin is deficient and that's why the heat is rising up, so we need to sort of like clear the heat and tonify the yin, whereas in classical Chinese medicine they think that the yang itself is just deficient and deficient yang floats because it's not grounded, so you need to tonify the yang, and essentially on one hand using very warm herbs to do that in classical Chinese medicine, like warming it more to anchor it, and mineral herbs are often used to kind of anchor it down, whereas in TCM, it's using completely different herbs, like often cooling herbs, and the detriment of that, if the classical Chinese medicine system's more correct, what you're doing in TCM is actually hurting the yang, because especially if you're using lots of these cooling things that are there, right? Or sometimes practitioners can kind of honestly mistake what they see on the surface of all this kind of heat symptoms as exterior heat or external heat, or they tend to use these cooling herbs to treat that. And really the only way you're going to know is the pulse diagnosis. So a patient who's got deficient, like a deficient pattern or a deficiency, isn't going to have a massive, strong pulse. There's lots of more complicated than that, but that's going to be a big difference, right? And then there's lots of other symptoms that are different there. But this is definitely a confusing thing for TCM students. So as a person who's just interested in this, who I'm making this video for, I'm assuming this person who asked me about insomnia isn't a practitioner. Of course, this is why it's confusing, and this is why it's taken me a while to make this video, because it's a big area. Like you can see, that's why I started out by reading all those patterns. Like some of these books saying 9 different reasons can cause it. So if I'm just picking 2 things, right? In general, this deficiency, and a practitioner is going to be the one that's going to tell you what kind of deficiency is there. Like is it blood deficiency? Is it yang deficiency? They might see, if you went to a TCM person, they're going to say, they might use the diagnosis of yin deficiency. If you go to a classical practitioner, they're never going to say yin deficiency. I'll be kicked out of my system. But we just think of things in a different way. So it's not that one's wrong or right. It's just another different way of thinking. It's the same as with the Chinese medicine. Maybe one is wrong or one right. But it's like Chinese medicine is a different way of thinking about your body to Western medicine. But then within Chinese medicine, there are like other different ways of thinking about the body in a Chinese medicine way. So this concept of this heat that we see, right? We see the heat, like we can see the person's restless. And that what will happen is they'll get sweaty at night. That'll be the main thing that will happen. They'll have like night sweats. And that's when TCM says that's a yin deficiency pattern, because they've got the night sweats. So in classical Chinese medicine, we'd say, yeah, they do have this deficient heat there, but it's not because they're yin deficient. It's because they're the yang that is their yang, and that heat that they're experiencing is their own body's energy. And TCM has that concept about it too. But I wanted to mention this because people may be watching this and thinking, well, I've done Chinese medicine before and it never helped. So if you've done TCM, that's different to classical Chinese medicine. You'll certainly be treated with a different approach if you use classical Chinese medicine for insomnia and you had what in TCM they would say is yin deficiency. We would treat it in a different way and use different herbs strategies, completely different. Like it's like chalk and cheese, like completely different. So yeah, that's one way of thinking about insomnia, is like your body's become deficient, and so it's no longer able to rest the mind. So what happens is, naturally when you go to bed, yin and yang are transforming, right? That Tai Chi symbol. So day turns into night, and night doesn't last forever either. Night turns into day. And so naturally your body's trying to do that, but there might be other things externally that are like triggering your body not to do that as smoothly and as easily as it should do. So what can happen is you put your head on the pillow, you close your eyes, and your Shen is trying to rest. It's trying to shut off these things. But you're lying there and you're like, oh, but what about tomorrow? What are we doing? And you're thinking about what you've got to do, or you literally, your mind is racing. You cannot turn your mind off. It's going. And this can be because you've had this trigger for your mind to be going, and you cannot just turn that off, just like go, okay, now time for bed. So what you've been doing before you go to bed might have to change. And some people call this sleep hygiene, right? Like a process that you use. So using dimmer lights. So light is a big factor in triggering our body's natural circadian rhythm. And this is a big problem that we have in society because of 2 reasons. One is electricity. So we can have things on and off however we want them. Lights, right? Whereas in the olden days, you'd have candles and they'd be dimmer, like they just were not as bright lights. And you'd have to bring that candle real close. It's an arduous effort to read a book. And certainly your books weren't lit up from a screen behind you. So a lot of people are on their phones late at night. And so you can get these things like the blue light blockers, they can help, but also just not being on them at that point in time. Just having some kind of protocol, the way you say to yourself, after 9 o'clock, I'm going to dim all my lights. So that would be the first thing I would try, is to use lamps. Maybe have a salt lamp. Don't have big bright overhead lights. If you've only got fluorescent lights, for instance, turn those off and just have a lamp. And really limit the use of lights from 9 p.m. till when you're going to bed. If you can try to read a book rather than watching TV or doing something else, and the other thing is stimulating your mind. Like, you might be okay, although looking at the screen isn't great. Certainly, the further away, the better. It's something that's there. How engaging is that to your mind? How disturbing is it to your mind? Every time you're doing those things where you're engaging yourself, right, your mental processes, you're like, your body's like trying to go to sleep, and it's like, oh, but wait, but this was exciting, and so it's also trying to do that. Oh, but wait, this was exciting, and that kind of thing. And then by the time you're like, oh, well, I better go to bed now, and then your mind's like, but hang on a minute, like I'm still thinking about what we were doing a few minutes ago. So that's part of it. Now, some people just naturally, they can work all night long and then they can just put their head in the pillow and go to sleep. So those people are probably not watching this video. Good on you if that's what you can do. But if you're struggling with insomnia, these are the things you have to do. Now, you want to make time to do this, because sleep is like one of the most fundamental things, if not the most fundamental thing in Chinese medicine. So sleep is where our body repairs itself. It's where you tonify blood. So I talked about having blood deficiency as a pattern. This is the catch-22, right? Where if you're blood deficient, you can't fall asleep. Well, if you can't fall asleep, you can't tonify your blood. So you get more blood deficient, and it gets worse and worse. And this is the example I was giving before about the insomnia causing people to go mentally insane with these kinds of patterns where they're raving and ranting. And you see this in some homeless people. And it's in some of the classical texts. Like there's this formula called Fengji Di Huang Tang, which is like a formula for people with this mental restlessness and like manic behavior and difficulty with all that stuff, because of this like really like deep blood deficiency. Like when you're blood deficient, there's other things you can do, right? So sleep is definitely important. And so sometimes the blood deficiency might be causing the sleep to be not great, or the sleep not being great could cause the blood deficiency. So meat is a big part of tonifying blood. Meat products, quality meat, you can watch my videos on that. If you're a vegan or a vegetarian, but there are ways around that, and I do have a video on blood deficiency for vegans and vegetarians. But this is one of the things where if you, let's say you want to get pregnant, you need high quality blood, you've got problems with getting pregnant, or you think you might have that because of your age or something like that as well, and you've got bad sleep, and you're a vegan and a vegetarian, and you've got a blood deficiency pattern, well, that would be a thing where you'd be like, okay, I need to just start having some bone broth or something like that to you have to weigh up what's most important to you and that kind of stuff. So sleep is a really important way of tonifying blood, because it's where your body does its repair, okay, and it's where your body then makes better quality blood. So hopefully this video has been useful and helpful, not too long-winded. So this is, I've kind of haven't really properly talked about the heart and kidney not communicating, but it is this idea of your Shen, your mind, like coming to rest. And this is the idea in the 5 elements of fire, which is representing the Shen and the mind, the fire element, and the water element, right? So water and fire. So this idea of like, if you can't have this, like, I'm awake now, I'm alert, I'm almost yelling at the screen, right? So this is fire. This is fire, right? This is alertness and consciousness. But I can't be like this all the time, because you'll literally burn out, right? Like the fire will extinguish. You'll have nothing to burn on. Like you need to have that nourishment to be able to hold the fire, to sustain it. And you probably know this for yourself. When you've had a really good night's sleep, you wake up in the morning and you'll feel good. And this is why kids wake up and they feel great, because hair clips coming out. Why do kids wake up, and they feel like, my nephew wakes up and he yells out, "It's the morning!" He first wakes up sometimes, and I'm just like, oh, is it? Like, because you've just been out to the count, right? That would be the perfect sleep for a kid, right? And then you wake up and you've had this, massive rejuvenation, and you're ready to go for the next day. And then you do the same thing again. And you see this a lot with kids. Like, you should observe them if you've got them, or have the chance to sort of think about this, because they just do these things naturally on instinct without thinking too much about it, right? You look at a kid and even parents can know, oh, you're tired, because they see them do certain things. And they need that sleep, and then they suddenly become, very untenable if they don't have that sleep, right? If a kid's meant to have its afternoon sleep and then they don't have that, then suddenly they become, very angry and might have a tantrum or, things like that. Because of just they need that sleep. They're on that, they're growing, and they need that rejuvenation because they've got so much exuberant yang to do the growth that's needed to literally grow bigger and stronger and taller and everything. And we as adults need that too, but we have more control, obviously, over our own circumstances. Like, no one's going to tell you to go to bed. You can do what you want, right? No one's saying you need to go to bed at 9 p.m, Marie, or you need to do this. So you have to control your own self, right? And give yourself some parameters. But also, we can sort of put things off in our minds. Oh, I'm okay. I'll soldier on. I'll be fine. And you might have lack of sleep or have detriment to your body just because you don't make time for sleep, enough time to go to sleep. Another thing that's just worth mentioning is the darkness of your room and the quietness of your space and the coolness of your space. So those three things are definitely important. So the more you can help yourself in that area to have a very quiet space, a very dark space, like no light, okay, get blackout curtains, it's you don't need that if you're out in the country and there's no ambient light coming in your room. And you will be naturally then woken up by the sun coming through your window. But these days there's noises everywhere. There's, sometimes there's rubbish trucks picking up rubbish at like 11 p.m. at night in some places, this kind of stuff. There's people that you can hear out on the street. So you can put earphones in, or put those band that goes around your head, those earphone blockers that are like a band thing you can get. Wear a sleep mask. Wear the eye mask. If that's all you can do, if you can't control, like, these are things you can do when you're traveling, right? So I know this from when I've traveled. Like, I was in Sydney a few years ago, and I remember it was like a crazy time because of the noise. That's why I got the idea from the rubbish truck. So I was like trying to fall asleep, and there was like a bloody rubbish truck picking up rubbish at 11 p.m. at night. So this is where you have these little tools that you can use if you travel a lot. This can help you to kind of get into the zone of the sleep better. So I also know there are cooling blankets. Now, I'm not sponsored by anyone on this podcast. I'm not promoting any particular product here, but I have seen these things advertised, and I don't have a cooling blanket myself, but I've seen them be used. If you've got the ability to have air conditioning and have it in such a way that it's not blowing directly on you, it's just able to cool the room, that's good. You need to be very careful in Chinese medicine about getting air blowing on you at night when it's hot. We can talk about that in a different video because that will make you easily get you sick. Colds and flus, stiff neck, this kind of stuff. If you've got cold wind or any wind blowing on you at night, you should be very aware of that and try to avoid that. So you want to try to have less eating it late at night, less heating things, less alcohol, less stimulating things, obviously coffee and things like that are stimulants, but just stimulating your mind with different things. If you're struggling to fall asleep, then these are things where, having some kind of winding down where you just naturally allow yourself to do that, avoiding the bright lights later at night. So at all costs, like if you have to even just have a little, a night light that you have in your house or something, so you don't have to go in and switch on a big bright light to brush your teeth, stuff like that. That's going to help you a lot actually with, because every time that light comes on, it stops the melatonin production that's happening. Because your brain's thinking, oh, it's the morning, right? So your brain is naturally, or your body's naturally going in sleep mode, and every time those bright lights come on, you're like, it's the morning. It's not really the morning. So you want to stop that from happening by not having those bright lights triggering that. as much as you can after a certain time. So pick a time. 9 p.m. is a good time if you're going to go to bed, 11 or something at night. So a few hours before you go to bed, try to limit those brighter lights and that stimulation. If you have to go on your phone, I would avoid having your phone in your bedroom even, right? Because you don't want that radiation sort of near you, plus ding, ding, ding and all this sort of stuff of people texting you. No one needs that ding, ding, ding. So I hope this video has been helpful and useful. So they're the points you could use for that. The points you can use for calming the mind. If you're a very anxious person, you're thinking and thinking and thinking, and your mind is very restless. So you could use these points here on your hand and this point here in the middle. So this is pericardium 7, pericardium 8, and heart 8. So heart 8 there, pericardium 8, pericardium 7, and just massaging those you can just sort of massage them in sort of like that. Those are good points to use for that. If you've got blood deficiency, it's a kind of not so much just a pressing a point situation. It's more of it's a bigger treatment protocol that's kind of needed. So you can watch my videos on the blood deficiency. But these points can help if you're blood deficient, but you're also anxious and you're finding it hard to sort of wind your mind down. Another one you can use is the Yin and Yang. So you can just press on that. You can squeeze that together on the top of your head, sort of here. Giving yourself a head massage, that can kind of help. But particularly this point here is the main one. So you could just kind of tap on that. You could squeeze that, press that one. So I gave you some points for the large intestine channel and the stomach channel. So if you had that heat kind of thing going on, those are some things you can use. And herbal medicine is much, much more complicated for this stuff, right? So you really need to see a herbalist that's going to be able to prescribe the herbs properly to you. And then also when you see an acupuncturist, they're going to be able to give you a protocol of points that they use all together. The downside of acupressure is you can only press one thing at a time, and you also you can't obviously needle them. And so the needling is going to be different to the pressing. But if that's all that you've got, it's better to do that. And often I have patients where I'll give them a treatment once a week, and then in between that, they might do the pressing and press the acupressure points to kind of help extend the life of that treatment, almost like that, like to continuously press, stimulate those points like regularly in between the treatments. So that can be quite helpful. So hope this has been helpful and useful to you. If it has, please leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. Love to hit 10, 20k subscribers. I'd love for the channel to grow. So if you're one of those people that just watches the videos and doesn't subscribe, make sure you subscribe. Thank you very much. I'll see you again on another video soon.
I can't get no sleep.